So this is the market for allergy medication. We didn't spend a ton of time talking about the assumptions you make about a market, but we make a couple assumptions that are relevant here. One, this is one product that's the exact same across the board. Flonase, the other one that you see on the commercials, all we assume that they're all the same. There's no product differentiation. There's like, oh no, that little mucus guy in the commercial is cooler, so I want that one. There's no colorful branding. We just make that assumption that it's just one product. That's a pretty obvious way that we relax this when we talk about what's called monopolistic competition markets, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Will, question?
You said there's difference.
Yeah, for sure. Here's the demand curve.
For sure.
There's, for like a year, or not a year, but like one season's dosage, we'll call the amount. Someone's willing to pay $100. So my mom wears like dark sunglasses like all the time because she has mega allergies. When like in the spring, it's really bad. When she's retired, she moved down to Florida. For some reason, Florida has like different, well, we know they have different plants and a different climate, but like I go down there and after a day, all of a sudden I have like weird, I feel like I have like a cold and like my eyes are like bulging and I have to have like different medicine that calms it down. I don't know what that's from because I never used to have it, but in normal times I'm like, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. So like I'm over here where like if I was like, oh, this is like $10 for the season, I'd buy that. But like $100, it's like a couple of days and then my body adjusts to it and I'm fine. Medication pharmaceutical companies. So just to clear up, that's why like, so I'm somewhere down here where I'm like, if the price is low, I'll buy it, but like $100, now. Pharmaceutical companies, it's just as easy. Imagine a conveyor belt and like these bottles along a conveyor belt, like drip, 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 just dropping like Flonase or like whatever like the medication is. It's very easy to like move some things and change the pharmaceuticals that go in on top and have it come out with Tylenol or have it come up with any other like medication. So if the price was like $10, they'd be like, nah, I'm not gonna provide this. I'll just provide more Tylenol. But if they're getting $100, they're like, shut down all the Tylenol, we're just making allergy medication. That's the idea of the upward sloping supply curve. Now at $95, people don't want many, but drug makers are like, yeah, I'm in. So there'd be a mega surplus, but that's why $100 isn't what ends up being the equilibrium price. $60 for a seasonal thing of allergy medication. I'll put a dollar sign here. And 20 million are purchased, or 20,000 or 20, it doesn't matter, but 20 is that number. What's interesting about the pharmaceutical market is I had this great stock that was working towards curing a disease and with like treating it, and so that didn't, this was like 5 years ago, it didn't spread. And then it worked and they made a lot of money, and then all of a sudden they started like having really low revenues or money's coming in. Well, what happened? They cured the disease, no one needed their product anymore. Sort of like a double-edged sword, but so part of me thinks that's why allergy medication doesn't like crush it, but that's a different story. All right, review question 1. What's the consumer surplus and the producer surplus? So the consumer surplus. Yes, it's this triangle up here, and we'll do the math in a second, but here's the thing. My mom is worth $100 for her. But she only has to pay 60 because there's one price. That's one of the other assumptions. So that 40 units of consumer surplus, she can just like put in her pocket, and she's like, yay, now I can buy more Tampa Bay Buccaneers tickets or something. There's someone who it's worth like $75 to, but they only have to pay 60. For me, like for most of my life, it was like, worth like maybe 40 bucks I'd pay for it. I wasn't part of the market. I was over here, I just didn't buy it. I don't get any benefit from it. Okay, that's it. So you add up all those vertical lines, all the way there, and it's a triangle. 1/2, the base is 20, the height is 40, that's 400. Also, for AP Econ, I can't vouch for every single Albert I.O. question off the top of my head. If you ever are doing like math that's like harder than this, you did something wrong. Someone on a free response problem like went onto the back page and had like long division and all this stuff. Probably spent 5 minutes doing like, and then they divided like, with that little house thing or whatever. Not even close. Like they're in, like what a waste of time that was. Like once you start doing like 8 divided by 3 is harder than you would do in the class. Because like it should be pretty easy where like I chose 20 because I just want to make sure 1/2 times a number makes everything else easier. Producer surplus. Some companies like, well, given everything else that we have as options, our opportunity cost, I'm willing to sell this for $30. Well, they get to sell it for 60. That's 30 units of consumer surplus. That lower triangle is the producer surplus. Now, we can't necessarily say, well, this market is better for producers than it is for consumers. We can't say they have more producer surplus than they have consumer surplus, so therefore they win. It's not like that.
What could you say?
Well, you'll see in the next piece, I'm going to change something, and then we can compare the consumer surplus here to the consumer surplus of whatever happens next. Okay. This is sort of like you self-assessing, like you should be able to do this and this next part. If you can't, or it seems really hard, you need to do more prep work. If this is like super easy, you're doing great. If it's like, okay, you should be okay. So a patent expires. A patent is a way that pharmaceutical companies keep their reap the rewards of their like research. So if you develop a new drug that cures blank, and then it just sells for like $1 a pill, you're not really going to make that much money. There's no incentive. So the U.S. we give patents, and let's not worry too much about like, well, this is a patent for all allergy medication. Maybe it's a patent for like the bottle that it comes in or whatever. But the point is the patent expires and more sellers enter the market.
Let's shift the reply up.
That's what I do.
What happens to, so you can check, but yeah, that's what we're gonna hit. What happens to equilibrium, price, and then equilibrium, quantity. So there's a list of like 6 things that shift demand and 4 or 5 things that shift supply. Supply, this is where it gets like This is why we're doing this example in class, and it's not like the test example right now. Supply goes up, but not vertically. Supply does not shift this way when more sellers enter the market. Here's quantity, moves this way. Yes, you could say it moves down, like visually. And that's why, like, does it go up? Does it go down? Supply is going to shift to the right is probably the like best way to say it. I don't have numbers. I don't want to do a ton of like algebra 1 to figure out like slopes because that's beyond the scope of our course. But equilibrium price is going to decrease. Equilibrium quantity is going to increase. Challenge by choice. This is a pretty easy challenge by choice. You could do a geometric proof that the new consumer surplus, which is this, is bigger than the old consumer surplus. That's easier than like if demand shifts. I'm sorry, that's an easier geometric proof than if demand shifts. Just like, you know, someone's excitable about geometry. Or maybe like patents. Last year, a student asked like, okay, so there's a US patent, but what about global? Like, is there such thing as a global patent? Like, can a company from China just take intellectual property from a company in the US and just replicate it? What's like the world, you know, and if you're interested in that, because I don't know all the details and whatnot of it, you can definitely do that as a challenge by choice as well. And I didn't give like a area, and I don't want to mess around with that for producer surplus. So those are two questions that you should definitely know.